What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. On today's episode of the podcast, Matt and I are going to be talking about the conference finals in the NBA, a not so epic game seven between the Nuggets and the Thunder, and where the second round losers like the Thunder and Boston Celtics go from here. Before we get started, just a reminder, you can reach out to us, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. Really appreciate you guys listening. We always love to hear from you. Let us know who you're picking for the conference finals and the NBA finals. I think both these series might be a lot closer than people think, and we'll talk about why here in a little bit. But for now, let's grab Matt. Let's talk NBA basketball. Let's go. All right, Matt is here, ready to talk some NBA conference finals. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
This is a hard transition from our previous conversation, Adam.
Yeah, the pre-show meeting is a Patreon-only exclusive and very likely not safe for work. But we do have an NBA conference finals. We have the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the Minnesota. You know what really threw me off today is I've been calling them the Wolves for a couple of years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing some research on Basketball Reference today, and everything is under the Minnesota Timberwolves still.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I thought they changed their name to the Wolves. I was not prepared for it to be Timberwolves.
No, I think they just changed the branding.
Yeah, it kind of threw me because I kept looking for Wolves and I kept missing it. But the Thunder versus the Wolves starts Tuesday, the day this podcast comes out. And then the Eastern Conference final that we all expected, the Indianapolis Pacers versus the New York Knicks, starts Wednesday. With these four teams in the conference finals, the NBA will have its seventh different champion in the last 7 years for the first time in league history. Starting from the furthest back, we have the Raptors, the Lakers, the Bucks, the Warriors, the Nuggets, and the Celtics as our last six champions. This will be champion 7. Also, looking at these teams, the Wolves and Pacers have never won a championship. The Thunder have never won a championship in Oklahoma City. They did win one as the Sonics in 1979. And if we're playing by LA Lakers rules, those championships count because the Lakers have 17 championships, 5 of which were actually won in Minnesota as the Minnesota Lakers, but they count those. So, and the New York Knicks have not won since 1973. So 3 teams that have basically never won, 1 team that hasn't won since the 70s. We're going to get a new champion, and not just like a new champion, but like a new champion.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty exciting, but do you think this level of parity is good for the NBA?
I mean, I do. I don't know if the NBA would agree, but I feel like when there's like 6 teams any given year that the champion has to come from one of those 6 teams. I feel like when playoff time rolls around, if you're not a fan of one of those teams, then you kind of are just checking out.
I feel like it's good for people like us who are going to watch it no matter what. And It's kind of fun to have a new champion, especially one that hasn't won in a long time, if ever. But I do feel like it's probably bad for the NBA and, well, because of casual viewers, where when you have like a big bad, like a dynasty type of team, like the Warriors or the Miami Heat, that just attracts more eyeballs. And some of the most memorable finals we've ever had were, Dallas versus the Miami Heat, where Dallas wins, and the Raptors versus the Warriors, where like the dynasty team or like the big bad team was kind of vanquished. And it seems like what's happening right now is that the NBA's kind of set itself up to not have those dynastic runs anymore with all of the second apron rules that they've put in place, where teams are now trying to avoid the second apron like a plague. And it's going to be very, very hard to keep cores together for a long time if you have multiple guys. Like, I think Boston is a good example where you got two guys that you're giving max contracts to in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and you got to pay both those guys 50 plus million a year, and they take up more than 2/3 of your salary cap next season.
Yeah.
Especially if one of them tears their Achilles. It'll eventually get difficult for everybody. Like, you look at the Denver Nuggets, they are paying a bunch of guys pretty high salaries, and like overpaying one guy or making one mistake now is enough to close your championship contention window.
Generally, not a good idea to offer a max contract to a guy that wouldn't be rosterable if he wasn't 6'10".
Yeah. Is this the part of the podcast where we start shitting on Michael Porter Jr.?
I mean, it's always that time of the podcast.
This is one of my favorite parts of the podcast. One of my favorite sports things with you is like we have a lot of things we disagree on in sports. We have a lot of things we agree on, but I feel like there is no subject in which we are more aligned than I hate Michael Porter Jr.
I don't understand what they thought they were getting. I genuinely don't, because they had quite a bit of time to see what he wasn't before they made that commitment.
I've been thinking about this a lot since yesterday. So it's Monday, May 19th. The Thunder versus the Nuggets game 7 was yesterday. The Thunder end up whomping the Nuggets, which I already had a problem with game 7 being at 3:30 on a Sunday. It just didn't feel game 7-y enough for me. But I hate looking forward to a game like that as much as I was and being like, oh man, the series has been punch counter punch.
Yeah.
We're going to see some like last minute adjustments. We're going to see like these coaches go all out, pull out like their whole bag of tricks. And one team just ends up absolutely whomping the other.
I mean, there was a pretty big coaching adjustment in that game. Caruso on Jokic worked. He did not have a fun game.
Yeah. Is this LeBron versus JJ Barea part 2 with Jokic
It
and
feels
Caruso?
kind of like it. Yeah.
I agree that it feels that way, but kind of watching back the offensive possessions today, I don't think that the Nuggets' problems stemmed from the fact that Caruso was on Jokic specifically. It's not like they were like, hey, we're going to put Caruso on Jokic and they're going to play one-on-one and that's going to be enough for us. It was, hey, we're going to put Caruso on Jokic. We're going to sag off of all of these non-shooters on the Denver Nuggets, and we're going to block every single passing lane. I've seen a lot today that, centers from the past, Shaq or Hakeem or all these other guys, they would have just posted up Caruso and just scored on him over and over and over again. But the problem for the Nuggets yesterday wasn't necessarily that Jokic couldn't post up Caruso, although he wasn't necessarily having a super easy time doing that.
No.
But the way that they were sagging off other shooters and helping on Jokic, and the way Caruso was going from like fronting Jokic to being behind him to, they cut off almost all of the passing lanes where the Nuggets could get the ball into Jokic in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, even if Jokic tried to set up deeper, that entry pass is going to be hell.
Yeah, the entry pass was a problem. The one passing lane they kind of left open was a kind of a high lob to Jokic where he'd have to catch it high and play it high. And that's not really Jokic's game, like playing above the rim like that. The real problem with the Nuggets is that they just don't have the shooters to punish you for playing that style defense,
Yeah.
right? Because they're sagging off Russ, they're sagging off Michael Porter Jr., they're sagging off Aaron Gordon, they're sagging off a lot of guys. And one, the Nuggets don't have the type of dude who can punish you for that. They don't even have the type of guys like during their championship run, they had KCP,
Mhm.
who Contavious Caldwell Pope. It's not like he's a dead eye shooter, but he is a good enough 3-point shooter where he can punish you for leaving him open. Like you can't really sag off of
Yeah.
him.
Yep. Bruce Brown.
Bruce Brown was, yeah, like good enough 3-point shooters. Russell
Yeah.
Westbrook is not that guy, right?
No.
So that's a problem. Putting Jokic in a position where he's uncomfortable, like he's not going to catch the ball high and play it high.
No.
Guys like Shaq, guys like Hakeem could do that because they're used to like throwing down alley oops and catching it high and shooting it high kind of
Mhm.
thing. All credit to the Thunder
Yeah.
because you're 100% right. Is like that was the hey, we're going to pull out this adjustment and this is going to be the thing that completely turns this game on its head and wins us this game. But I look at the Nuggets and I'm like, hey, man, the reason that you don't have those guys who can punish that situation is because of how you've built this roster and how you've managed the contracts on this roster. And the absolute most egregious one is the Michael Porter Jr. max rookie extension. They paid him I think it's 36 million this year, 38 next year, and 41 the year after. That could be two guys in today's NBA. That could be maybe
Yeah.
three guys in today's NBA. And we were going through all of the guys who are making less money than Michael Porter Jr. is. I think he's tied for like the 36 highest paid player in the
Hmm.
league right now. Coincidentally tied with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's on the exact same max rookie extension contract. So he's making the same amount of money as Michael Porter Jr. this season and over the next two. Matt, you want to take a wild guess at which one of them is going to make more after that?
Why is he going to make more than SGA?
Is they paid MPJ before they let Bruce Brown or before they let KCP go, but you already made the point that when they decided to pay him, they had already had enough time to know, like, here's what this guy is, here's what he's
Yeah.
not. And what he is not is a
NBA
35
player.
plus. Yeah. Well, I was going to go with 35 plus $1 million NBA player, but he's not the type of guy I'd want to have on my roster really at all.
What it really comes down to for me is he is a 6'10" perimeter base player who is bad at all of the things that perimeter base players need to do. He can't reliably score for you. He can't space the floor. Sure as hell can't rebound. And he can't create for other players. On defense, he's an absolute nightmare liability. What are you paying him for?
It's funny because he had the arm injury, and I've heard on multiple podcasts today, they're like, oh, Michael Porter Jr., or they're like, Aaron Gordon was out there with a torn hamstring, and Michael Porter Jr. is out there with one arm. And the only thing I could think of is like, there to me is no difference between him out there with one arm and him out there with two arms. And good God, you could give Michael Porter Jr. three arms, and I still wouldn't want him on my team, especially not for $30+ million a season. I listened to a couple of pods today that talked about where do the Denver Nuggets go from here? And the common refrain I keep seeing on like podcast and Reddit and TikTok and all this stuff is like, well, they need to trade Michael Porter Jr.
Who is going to take him on that contract? Do you understand how much draft capital you have to attach to him in order to get someone to take him?
If Michael Porter Jr. was good enough to have trade value, you probably wouldn't be talking about trading him right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like we'd be sitting here and being like, oh, well, how do they reconfigure this team and what do they do? Michael Porter Jr. has negative trade value.
Yeah, I mean, like I've been very critical of like Chris Middleton in the past, right? I can understand a team trading for him for some reason or another, right? Whether it's to get assets to take on his contract, or if they think that they can get a little bit more out of him and he can fill a role for them. Like I can see a world where it makes sense. However, in 2 years, this man is going to be making $41 million. There is no role on a team that I think he can perform at a high level. So
Yeah.
if I am a GM, I need at least two first round picks in order to take that on.
This is the thing about the Nuggets too, is they don't own a lot of their picks coming up.
Yeah.
So I don't know. People I think like to throw out trades and they like to be like, oh, you should do this, you should do that. But the question is like, what are you getting back for Michael Porter Jr. that is going to contribute to your team in any way, shape, or form? Like you're giving up assets to get rid of Michael Porter Jr. at this
Yeah.
point. So you almost kind of have to ride it out. This is kind of the point is like, so you have the championship Denver Nuggets. They were paying Michael Porter Jr. already, or they had already given him the extension when they won the championship. If you just turned Michael Porter Jr. into Bruce Brown and KCP, two guys who left this team, this team is way better off
Yeah.
than they are with Michael Porter Jr. on the team,
Yeah.
especially at this contract. And you really gave up your depth to give big contracts to Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon's contract's actually pretty good. His extension hasn't kicked in yet. So he's 23 million this year, 23 next year, and then 32, 34, and 37.
And by then, with the salary cap going up, I think that will look a lot better.
I also don't hate 30. I guess like 37's a little bit high, but yeah, by the
Yeah.
time we get there, it won't be as bad. But I don't hate
Yep.
30 million for Aaron Gordon with what he
Yeah.
brings to that team.
Yeah. Granted, where he is at that point of his career, because I think he's got to be like pushing 30 now, isn't he?
Yeah, he'll be 30 next year. He's 29 right now. So
Yeah.
quite literally pushing 30.
Like I mean, I still think Aaron Gordon is a very good player. Like I understand paying him real money to play for your team. Jamal Murray, again, good player. The consistency is a thing is an issue for me, but like his peaks warrant paying actual NBA money. And PJ's peaks are like Jamal Murray's floor.
I want to say this real quick in defense of Chris Middleton, too, who you brought up, is I think that's also was the case for Chris Middleton when, now he's kind of a shell of what he used to be. But
Yeah,
even like when he was good and he was on that Bucks run
yeah,
where they were a contender for a couple of years there, his peaks were very good. He just was not consistent, and the
yeah.
peaks became less
No,
and less frequent.
that's
So
yeah, that's more like my critiques of Chris Middleton is that he was never consistent.
yeah,
But if yeah, like I might have said it on this podcast, so like I don't think he ever shot like between like 40 and 50% from the floor in the game because he either shot like 70+% from the field or he shot like 30%.
yeah. Yeah, but at least the peaks were there where Michael
Yeah,
Porter Jr., I think you're dead on is like there's not high enough peaks to justify paying this guy what you're paying him.
no,
I think
yeah,
the Nuggets fell into this trap that a lot of teams fall into where they went like the Celtics are going through this right now where they win a championship and they're like, we got to pay everybody on this team right
Yeah.
now. And then you end up 1 or 2 years later and you're like, holy shit, we are paying Drew Holiday how much money for the next
Yeah.
couple of years? God damn. And I think there's so many fans who, I don't know, I want to say casual fans, but I think that there are like hardcore fans who just believe that pretty much anybody is tradable. Where like so many people play 2K and you just put guys in the trade finder and it shows you like at least there's like 7 trades for Drew Holiday, right?
Yeah.
And I see this at a lot of like Boston Celtics fans is they're like, oh well, with Tatum's injury, we got to get under the second apron next season. So we'll just trade Drew Holiday and we'll cut some salary. And I don't think people understand that like trading guys like Michael Porter Jr., Drew Holiday, I honestly would even say Jamal Murray at this point with what's left on his contract because he's another guy whose extension hasn't kicked in yet for the
Mhm.
Nuggets. Kicks in next season where they're going to pay him 46, 50, 54, and 57 out through 2029. If you went to trade Jamal Murray right now, who is offering you something that's going to upgrade your roster?
I'm not sure what team, but I will say, because we kind of talked about this maybe last week a little bit, but a team could look at him and be like, we can use him as that high upside six man
Yeah, but for
and be will.
$50 million a season, though, I'm not talking about just
Yeah,
Jamal Murray. I'm talking about paying Jamal Murray $50 million a
yeah,
season for the next 4 seasons.
yeah. I mean, I could see someone doing it. I could see like the Rockets
But
getting that explosive score, having the salary cap. Now, should they? No.
well, if you got to match the salaries, though, it probably means like Fred Van Vliet's going to be in that trade. And
Yeah,
watching what I watched, I think I'd rather just have Fred Van Vliet
yeah,
at this point. I don't want to overreact to like one playoff series against one of the best NBA defenses that we've seen, at least in the modern era with the Thunder.
yeah,
But I think just seeing what we've seen and knowing that Jamal Murray is going to be 29 next season, and by the time this contract is up, he's going to be 34. I have a hard time believing someone's giving you something back for 50 million. So I
yeah,
a lot of people are out there today being like, well, they got to improve this roster around Jokic. I think it's very, very difficult for them to make any type of improvement with the contracts that they have,
yeah,
unless you're talking about trading Aaron Gordon. And I just wouldn't do that with how
yeah,
he fits with Jokic. People were really stunned when Calvin Booth was fired 3 days before the playoffs started or 3 games before the playoffs started. I'm shocked that Calvin Booth made it that long. Look at the Nuggets roster, man.
yeah,
The fact that they took OKC to game 7 actually concerns me for OKC in their matchup with the Wolves more than anything else because with all of the injuries and with the lack of depth and what they are paying the guys they're paying, holy shit, man, OKC should have ended this so much sooner. And I think it's a credit to Jokic that it even got to 7.
yeah,
And a lot of people are like, oh, well, if it wasn't for Russell Westbrook, the fact that you're paying Russell Westbrook $4 million a season is not the problem in Denver. The problem is that you're paying Russell Westbrook to be your fourth best player, right? Like, that's not the role that Russ should be in,
no,
especially not on a $4 million contract. But it's like, well, we got Jokic, Murray, and Gordon, and then good God, let's hope Christian Brown can give us something. So yeah,
yeah.
I think the fact that you have the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic and this is the roster you put around him, I'm shocked that Calvin Booth made it to 2025.
Do you think
Honestly,
that Michael Porter Jr. has a shrine to Nikola Jokic in his home?
I think everyone on this team should.
Because good God, did Jokic make him all of his fucking money?
Yeah, I don't understand that, man. I would love to have an honest conversation with Calvin Booth and anybody else that worked in that Nuggets front office at that time and say, why did you do this?
Who hurt you?
I'll never understand that. It's like it's so funny because people got the pitchforks out for Russ. Russ made $3.3 million this season. It's not Russell Westbrook's fault that he's the fourth best player on this team. That is an
Yeah.
indictment on your entire front office. So, but good. I'm glad we shat on Michael Porter Jr. He deserved it. I want to talk about what's gonna happen over the next couple of weeks with these conference finals. My big picture takeaway right now is I think OKC has to look at this and say, if not now, when is it going to happen with this core?
Yeah.
You know, you're clearly the best team left. There's no Jokic, like you already beat Jokic. There's no Luka, no LeBron, no Giannis, no Tatum, no Curry. There's no super team that's going to stop you. You have the best guy left.
Hmm.
I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say like, hey, let's draft all of the players left. You get the first pick. Who are you taking?
Oh,
Right?
yeah. You're definitely taking SGA.
You're taking Shea. Maybe I might listen to an argument for Jalen Brunson with how he's played, but
Yeah.
you're not
But
taking him.
I just, everything that Shea offers, it's too much to pass up.
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% agree with that. So I look at the fact that not only do you have a significant advantage from that aspect, but I also look at like you won the West this year.
Hmm.
Chances are they're going to be the best team in the West next year as well. But I look at what's potentially coming in the West. So it's going to be a little while, but Dallas gets Cooper Flag to pair with Anthony Davis. Gets interesting. I made the case for the Lakers a couple podcasts ago that like this wasn't really the ideal team to have around Luka,
Hmm.
but I think the Lakers will figure that out in the next couple seasons because they're the Lakers and other teams will line up and be like, oh, who would you like to put around Luka? How can I help facilitate that for you, LA? So they'll start figuring that out around Luka. I look at how Memphis played them before Lou Dort publicly assassinated John Morant. And I kind of can't get out of my head that John Morant was cooking them in games
Yeah.
3 and 4 before his public execution. And then I think San Antonio is like a major wild card right now because they have Wemby. They have the number 2 pick in the draft and a shitload of assets. And it's like, hey, maybe they just draft Dylan Harper and they're like, we're going to have Wemby and Harper and we're going to try to build, a team with some longevity around those two guys. Or maybe they say, hey, Milwaukee, here's Keldon Johnson, Stephon Castle, Harrison Barnes, number 2, number 14, and maybe a couple of our other 22 picks that we have over the next 7 drafts. How about Giannis Antetokounmpo and Victor Wembanyama together for the next 3 years? I don't hate that if I'm either side, honestly. So I look at what's coming and the fact that there will likely be more challenges for you in the future. Like maybe if Denver is healthier in this series, that it could go a different direction. Who knows? But like this has to be your year if you're OKC, right? Like
Yeah.
you're minus 145. That's the best odds to win the championship out of the 4 teams remaining. Knicks are plus 450, Wolves plus 550, and Pacers plus 600. You should win.
Yep.
But I think whether or not they will is the big question that's facing everybody right now.
100%. We talked about it before the playoffs started that they kind of had to get the job done to like really prove things to us. And granted, yes, they are here, right? They're here in the Western Conference Finals, and that's fair and valid. And I would say that their path to the Western Conference Finals has raised some concerns.
I look at that Memphis series and like I think that's I'm going to start sounding like a Grizzlies fan, but I think that that's a big what if in the Memphis
Yeah,
series because Memphis wins game 3 and they're up by 29 in game 4 or 27, whatever it
yeah.
was before Ja gets hurt. You go to 7 against a I mean, I'll give them credit. It's a veteran Denver team that's been here before.
Hmm.
Uh, More often, as far as game sevens go, they've been there more often than any other team since 2013, I believe it is, or
Yeah.
whatever this run is. They've had more game sevens than anybody else. But I mean, we just talked about it with Denver. They're not deep. They had a lot of injuries.
Hmm.
The defense is not good. They were like 21st in defense this season if you go by defensive rating. And I look at the Wolves, man, and I want you all to go back to the NBA Hot Takes podcast that we recorded on February 21st. That was the release date, where I talked about how I thought the Wolves were the best matchup for the Thunder in the Western Conference. If you would have given me the option in the beginning of the playoffs, who do I want to play least if I'm the Thunder? I would 1,000% say the Wolves in either
Yeah.
conference because I think the Wolves present really interesting matchup problems for the Thunder that they have not had to face yet. I mean, number one being the thing I talked about on the February 21st podcast. They have so many looks. The Wolves have so many looks that they can and will throw at OKC,
Yeah.
at Shea Gilgis Alexander, and at J Dub. So Denver's perimeter defense is pretty horrible. You're relying on Christian Brown, Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, Russell Westbrook, and a little bit of Aaron Gordon to defend all these perimeter guys that the Thunder have. We're going to go from that to Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, and Dante DiVincenzo. Not to mention that that's backed up by Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid. And for as much as we want to crap on Rudy Gobert and as much as I dislike Rudy Gobert, like the one thing he does very well is protect the rim. That's going to be tough. Kind of to drive that point home. Defensive ratings so far in the playoffs: Rudy Gobert 105, DDV 107, Ant 107, McDaniels 108, Nas 108.
Yeah.
They were also the number 4 defense in terms of defensive rating during the regular season. That is going to be really tough. And I think at times that Thunder offense really struggled against Denver's defense. And going into that series, I did not expect them to struggle at all. So, SGA is going to figure things out, right? Like they can make it
Hmm.
hard on SGA. They're not going to stop SGA.
No, he's too good.
I'm still looking at J Dub though.
Yeah, no, he's the key. I mean, it really comes down to he has to make shots. If he can make shots throughout the series, they win. I think it really comes down to that.
Yeah.
Because if he makes shots, then the defense has to react to him. If the defense is reacting to him and the defense is reacting to SGA, that's going to make things a lot easier on everyone else. And I would say, especially Chet Holmgren. And I think if Chet is able to get going in this series, that's probably, if all three of those guys are able to get going in this series, that's probably too much for any defense to kind of keep up with.
But that's been the question with the Thunder all season, though, is like,
Yes,
can
exactly.
we know SGA is going to get going, right?
Yep.
He's going to get his, but can that secondary scorer step up? And we saw in that Nuggets series, like Jalen Williams plays well, they win, and often by a lot.
Yep.
Like he played well in game 7. I think it was game 2 or game 3. He played really well,
Yeah.
and they dominated both those games. Game 6 and whatever there's 2 games in that series where he was horrific and they lose.
Yeah.
on one hand, you don't want to simplify it too much, but on the other hand, I do think it's that simple. Is like
Hmm.
he really struggled in some games where he's being defended by Christian Brown and Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah.
Now you're switching that where the primary defender is going to be Dante DiVincenzo, Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, and it's like, oh yeah, well we'll just switch it. We'll just get it in the switch. It's like, oh cool, congratulations, you're getting someone else who's really fucking good on defense, right? Like they're a great team defense. They have great
Yeah.
individual
Yeah.
defenders,
And
and
the hope is you're able to switch and hunt Rudy Gobert on the perimeter. That
so
is the hope.
I want to talk about the questions the other direction in a minute because I think
Yeah.
there's a few,
Hmm.
but can J Dub get going against this defense for at least 4 out of 7 games? I think is a very legitimate question. The other big question I have for OKC in this series is Jokic was absolutely bullying them at points in that last series, right?
Yeah.
Where he's going up against Chet, he's going up against Hartenstein. Like
Hmm.
that was a problem. They were able to switch it up with Caruso. For the Wolves, we're talking not just one big guy. Like that's the other kind of problem with Denver is like you have Jokic and then what else? Like yeah, you have Aaron Gordon, but it's not like what you have in Minnesota where you have multiple big guys with a lot of beef, right? So
Yeah.
Gobert is Gobert and he's going to do Gobert things, but Naz Reid can be a problem off the bench and Julius Randle has been playing out of his goddamn mind
Yeah.
this postseason, which might be the most stunning thing to me of anything that's happened this
Oh,
postseason,
absolutely.
is that
Like it's not even close.
Julius Randle is averaging 24 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists per game on 56.5 effective field goal percentage and 62% true shooting in these playoffs.
I think we were both on record last year saying that the biggest factor in the Knicks going on that run last year was the fact that Julius Randle did not play.
Yeah, that I made a TikTok video saying that it actually would have been more impressive to me that Jalen Brunson got the Knicks as far as he got them last season if he also had to deal with Julius Randle being on the court.
Yeah.
Because people were like, "Oh, well, if Julius Randle had been there, would have could have been different." I'm like, "Yeah, it would have been different. They would have been out in the first round instead of the second." I've been trashing Julius Randle for years, and I have to give him his props, man. It's not just
Yeah.
statistically. Watch the games. He might be the best player on the Wolves right now, and he's like hitting deep threes and like shimmying
Yeah.
towards Curry on the bench in that Golden State Warriors series. I'm like, I think Anthony Edwards' swag has rubbed off on this guy. That's gonna be it's gonna be an issue both ways where it's like, okay, if Chet's on Julius Randle's gonna beat his ass. But like, do they put Caruso on Julius Randle and how do they deal with that? And is that as effective when, you know, doing what they did to Jokic, you're shutting down Denver's offense completely.
Yeah.
Doing that to Julius Randle, it's like, yeah, okay. He's not our primary playmaker. He's not our primary scorer. Go like, please use Alex Caruso on Julius Randle so that he's not on Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
Right. And I know they have Cason Wallace and they have a lot of other guys to throw at the Wolves as well, but like I would love to not have Alex Caruso on Anthony Edwards. Like please do that. So I think the Wolves, they're deeper. I think they're just probably a better team than the Nuggets at this point, although they don't have any individual player who's close to as good as Jokic. But let's flip it around. Questions for the Wolves. My number one being, can Julius Randle keep it up
Yeah.
in the Western Conference Finals against the best defense that we've seen at least in quite some time? Or does he turn back into a pumpkin? Because if Julius Randle turns back into a pumpkin, this is already over.
Yeah.
This is already over because playoff scoring for the Wolves, Anthony Edwards 26.5 a game, Randle 23.9, call it 24. McDaniels 15 and a half, and Naz Reid 11, and nobody else is in double figures. So they've relied on Julius Randle's offense pretty heavily during this
Mhm.
playoff run. And if you would have told me that they were doing that coming into this, I would have picked the Lakers in round one.
Yeah. And in fairness, the way he's played, it was smart to rely on him offensively because he's played incredible.
But he's been amazing. I'm not trying to diss him. I'm just saying, like,
It's just like the most bizarre thing I've ever seen.
if he continues to play this well, I think the Wolves can win this series.
Yeah.
I 100% think the Wolves can win this. The way it is now, I it's a coin toss to me.
Hmm.
If I was making a pick, I would probably pick either of these teams in seven because I'm so uncertain about who's going to win. Two other big questions. One of them being what you already mentioned is Shea Gilgis Alexander just going to drag Gobert out to the perimeter and continually beat his ass like we saw Luka do last year?
Yeah.
And then the other one is the Thunder. Like I've mentioned a couple times how good this defense is. One of the things that makes them so good is they have guys like Caruso and Cason Wallace and Lou Dort, and those guys will pick you up full court and really be a pest the entire way up the court.
Yeah.
As far as ball handlers go, the Wolves point guard is Mike Conley, who's old and not as athletic as these guys that he's going to be going up against. Anthony Edwards, who can handle the ball, but he's not the best handle in the league. And who else is bringing the ball up the court?
Yeah.
I could really see that being an issue. Like to even just for the Wolves to get into their stuff, I think could be a really big issue in this series. I don't know. I have major questions at both directions. Did I miss anything?
I think the only other thing I would add it to is just like is Ant ready to get them over the hump? Because it kind of felt like he kind of ran out of gas last year.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like I made the case last year for Dallas to beat the Wolves in the
Hmm.
conference finals. And my reasoning being like, yeah, this Wolves team was kind of built to beat Jokic.
Yeah.
And they beat Jokic. Congratulations. They were not built to deal with Luka Doncic.
No.
I kind of think they are built to deal with this Thunder team, though. As much as anybody can deal with someone like Shea Gilgis Alexander, right? Like you're never gonna fully deal with that guy. But
Yeah.
multiple good wing defenders, a lot of solid bigs up front. Like I think there's a lot to like with the Wolves, and it would not surprise me at all if they win this series.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you in that like this series is pretty much coin flip for me. It's just I look at the Thunder and I feel like the outcome of this series is in their hands. Is someone other than Shea going to show that they can consistently score? Because if that happens, I think that's all they need.
That's the key. That's been the key for them the whole series.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, and
That was the key for them last year.
I would say more specifically, the series is in Jalen Williams' hands,
Yeah.
right? Like Jalen Williams shows up, and it's not even like he has to be amazing. I think if he just isn't bad, that they can win
Mhm.
this. I One thing that worries me with the Wolves is, like I said, they've been really reliant on Julius Randle's offense, and I think for
Yeah.
large portions of that Warriors series, the offense was not particularly great. You know, they were barely beating a Warriors team that was missing Steph Curry
Yeah.
at some points, right? Like you would expect them to kind of blow that team out. I don't know. It's like were they playing with their food? Were they? I don't know.
No,
Not fully convinced.
that the Wolves are not a team that I feel like want to win by scoring a ton of points, right? They are that like crocodile that wants to like drag you under the water and drown you.
Yeah. They play pretty slow
Yeah.
as well. Like, so it's not a bad comp. I think this is going to be a bit of a defensive slugfest. Like, I don't think you're going to see too many super duper high scoring games. I think if the Wolves win games in this series, it's going to be close and like low scoring.
Hmm.
I could see there being a couple games or like a game or two where the Thunder just like beat the brakes off of them,
Yep.
where it's by a lot. But
Yeah. And
I just think it's way
it's
more
going
of
to
a
be really important for those watching. And I know that Celtics fans in particular have fallen victim to this in the past, that when those games happen, to remember that that game only counts as one win because that blowout is not remotely indicative of what is going to happen in the next game.
yes. I I thought you were going to talk about the 3-point shooting because the Wolves. One thing that like I like and also hate for the Wolves is that they take a lot of threes.
Yep.
I think that gives them a chance in a couple of games in a way where like, hey, if they're
Yeah.
falling and you hit 40% of 53s, like yeah, you can
Yeah.
steal that one.
Mhm.
But the Thunder can match that as well.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's a lot to be interested in this series. I think to me, it's definitely more of a coin flip than the odds make it out to be. OKC's minus 375 to win the series right now. And I just look at that. I'm like, okay, that's too high. But I also don't know that I would bet on the Wolves. One thing I really like is like I feel like Anthony Edwards and Shea Gilgeous are kind of polar opposites as like people. And I kind of like the idea of like getting a little rivalry going here
Yeah.
between the two of them is like two, wing guard kind of combo players. They're similar size. Like you got Shea, who's like reserved, kind of like a robot, and you got Anthony Edwards, who's like
Yeah.
all action, all passion, all child support. So I had to like take a little shot, a little shot. I will say before we talk about the other series, I will not be rooting for the Wolves.
Yeah.
Like
Good God.
I've done my bit on Anthony Edwards, and then you have the Rudy Gobert story of like he kicked his pregnant girlfriend and his 1-year-old son out of his house recently.
And then when she tried to move back to France, he told her not to because he wants to settle the custody in the courts in the US afterwards, which I don't know. Maybe you could just let your pregnant wife and child continue to live with you.
I feel like if I was that woman's lawyer and he was like, "Yeah, I want whatever kind of custody he's seeking of his son," I would just be like, "Yeah, he's one, and you just kicked him out of your house."
Yeah.
You, this seems like the most open and shut case to me in the world. Like
Yep.
we're deciding in favor of the mother. Like,
Yeah. No,
you know,
it's not going to go well for him.
it shouldn't, but he's very wealthy and that changes things. But I saw this thing on the Kings subreddit where someone posted this thing and they're like, "Oh, who should Kings fans be rooting for in the last four?" And the guy was like, "I feel like the Wolves are really easy to root for." And I'm like, "Why are the Wolves easy to root for? Why?" Because they have two massive pieces of shit on their team, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying that other teams don't. Maybe it's just not as public, but
Yeah.
at least there's a question with other teams. But I was having this discussion with my sister earlier. Is like, God, as much as I hate Anthony Edwards, it's also kind of hard to hate Anthony Edwards sometimes.
Yeah.
Even when he's being a total piece of shit, he's still really funny.
Yeah.
You
No,
know, so
like I said, when someone's a piece of shit and they're funny, like it's a terrible thing because you can't stay mad at them.
I know, and I always look at this as like, so say you're like a Wolves fan, and you've been a Wolves fan your whole life, right? And you have this young star who's like amazing. He's one of the most fun guys to watch on the basketball court, right? And like off the basketball court. And I think a large reason that people like him is that he is so authentic and he's not afraid to talk his shit in a time where, like, we did the Edwards versus Tatum comp last week, where it's like, hey, Anthony Edwards is a massive piece of shit, but he's very authentic. So
Hmm.
people like him, where like Tatum is seemingly a really good guy, but he's so rehearsed and so fake that people are like, yeah, I like Anthony Edwards more. I don't care about send to video. send
Yeah.
send to video. And so I understand, like, between the authenticity and like how funny and charming he is, and then
Yeah.
his play style on the court being one of, if not the most fun guy to watch in the entire NBA
Yeah.
at some points, I understand why people would be rooting for the Wolves. I'm just saying I will not be. We spent most of our time on that series. There is another series going on. The
Is there?
Pacers, yeah, the Pacers and the Knicks. You probably won't hear much about it, but uh starts on Wednesday. And I have to say, I've been thinking about Wolves Thunder for a long time because, like I mentioned, February 21st, I was talking about how the Wolves were probably the biggest threat to the Thunder in the West. I have not spent that much time thinking about Pacers Knicks, I hate to say, but I I feel like this series is going to be a lot of fun
Yeah.
as well. Revenge series for the Knicks after the Pacers eliminated them in 7 last
Hmm.
year. Do you, do you have a lean in this series? Is there one of these teams you like a lot more than the other?
I feel like I have to lean Knicks based on Brunson continuing to be incredible in clutch moments. Bridges just making plays on defense that people just shouldn't be able to make. He has had moments where he reminds me that he's Cat, but like Cat has also had a lot of moments in these playoffs where he's been very good. I think that's going to be a lot for the Pacers to try and handle.
I also lean Knicks because I'm like, okay, what is the best thing that either one of these teams does? And like unit wise, I would probably say the Knicks defense is the best
Yeah,
thing. Although I do feel like this is a strength on strength with the Pacers offense versus the Knicks defense.
yeah,
And that a lot of times what happens when you have a strength on strength is that it also means like quote unquote weakness on weakness. And
yeah.
so the matchup to really watch is the Knicks offense versus the Pacers defense.
Hmm.
And when I go to the Knicks offense, I'm just like, yeah, like the best offensive player in the series, the best player in the series is Jalen Brunson.
Yeah.
Right. And we talked about his ability to hit tough shots. We talked about like his footwork probably being the best in the NBA out
Hmm.
of any player, period.
Yeah.
I do want to say this about the Pacers, though, is that I feel like we get to this point and we want to rewrite history a lot where the Pacers beat the absolute shit out of the Cavs. The Cavs were one of the best teams this entire season, and all of the advanced stats suggested that the Cavs should absolutely be a contender. And then the Pacers beat them in 5 games, and everybody's like, oh, it turns out the Cavs sucked. And I just want to posit the question to you and the listeners: what if the Cavs don't suck? What if the Pacers are really, really good? You know, I think the same thing about the Wolves. Like the Wolves beat the Lakers in round 1, and everybody's like, oh, okay, well, I guess the Luka and LeBron Lakers suck. What if they don't suck?
Yeah.
What if the other team is really, really good?
Yeah.
And we're gonna overlook them because we're like, oh, okay, well, I don't know, man. They beat the Bucks and they beat the Cavs, and it turns out that like, oh yeah, well, the Bucks, it's just Giannis and they have no depth, and that team sucks. And it turns out the Cavs are just a bad playoff team and they suck. But what if neither of those things are true, and they beat the second best player in the NBA in a series, and then smoked the best team in the NBA or the best team in the East? This is the second straight conference finals for the Pacers.
Yep.
And I just want to posit to everybody out there that that's not an accident.
No.
and that this team is actually very good, and
Hmm.
watching them is extremely fun.
Miles Turner has played absolutely out of his goddamn mind this year.
He's played bonkers. But like the thing I love about the Pacers, and I think you can also levy this as a criticism, especially against the Knicks, because as amazing as Jalen Brunson is, sometimes that offense is just like, Jalen, go get us a bucket.
Yep.
We're all just gonna watch. Like, let's all watch Jalen get us a bucket. The
Here's our offense. Pass the ball to Tucker.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's like Jalen will pass it
Uh,
to Cat, who will pass it back to Jalen, and he will ISO whoever is defending him. And it's great when it works, right? But I criticize the Celtics for this all the time. Is like, when that doesn't work,
yeah.
what do you run? Because the Celtics, the answer is nothing. They're like, hey, Tatum's gonna ISO. If that doesn't work, Brown ISOs. I'm like, okay, well, what if that
Yeah.
doesn't work? And they're like, I don't know, Horford three. Okay, fantastic,
17 times.
great guys. And I think there's a bit of that in the Knicks too, but the Pacers and Tyrese Halliburton specifically, like, Tyrese Halliburton has reached a level that only Jokic and Curry have reached in the last couple of years, where I will challenge you. Like, you can't say Jokic and you can't say Curry. Who is more fun to play with than Tyrese Halliburton? He is the least
Yeah.
selfish star player there is. And when you have a guy like that, we've seen throughout the history of the NBA that when you know the ball could come back to you,
Yeah. Like Nash was like that.
Nash was like that. Yeah, Jason
Yeah.
Kidd was
Mhm.
like that. There's some good examples of guys like this throughout NBA history where, like,
Yeah.
and I say Curry because Curry is the most recent example and probably the best example. Is like, yeah, he's the best player, and when you need a bucket, you can give it to him and be like, go get us a bucket.
Yeah.
We've seen that with Tyrese in these playoffs. But if I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna pass the ball to Tyrese, and if I get open, the ball is gonna come back to me. I'm gonna back cut. I'm gonna like run my ass off. I'm gonna get open, man. I
Hmm.
want that ball back. It's not like Jalen Brunson where it's like, I'm gonna give Jalen Brunson the ball. He's gonna ISO for 14 seconds and then take whatever shot he gets. So I'm just gonna kind of stand here. The ball movement is infectious, and the ball will always move faster than the defense moves. And I think you watch the Pacers, and I heard this analogy on a podcast the other day, and I forget which one it was, so I apologize. But they were just basically saying like, the Pacers offense just sees angles and creates angles that no other offense in the league sees and creates. And so yes, the Knicks have a very good defense, but I think the Pacers are going to have a very, very good attack for that
Yeah.
as well. So
Yeah. Well, and I think when you are encouraging that kind of ball movement and that kind of aggressive cutting and off-ball movement, like it does just become infectious to try passes that you just wouldn't otherwise try.
there's nothing that's harder to defend than five guys like constantly moving and passing
Yeah.
too. Like, this is why the Warriors were so good for so long offensively. Even
Yep.
before they had Kevin Durant, it's ball movement, it's
Yeah.
cutting, it's like guys getting open, finding the right guy, right play at the right time.
Hmm.
In game 4 of that Pacers Cavs series, the Pacers won by 20, and Halliburton wasn't even good. He had like 11, 5, and 5 in that game.
Yeah.
Like, he was not good, and they won by 20, and then he comes back in game 5, the put away game, and is like 31, 8, and 6, and he's amazing. So I think when you're not 100% reliant on your best player like that, and like other guys will find a way to move and score and like make the right play at the right time,
Hmm.
that makes you really dangerous. And I don't know, man. The more I talk about it, the more I'm kind of talking myself into the Pacers.
Honestly, that in the defense is what the Knicks struggled with against Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And if it wasn't for a couple of things like outside of Pistons' control, like they probably win that series.
I just think the fact that I could really talk myself into either of these teams right now
Hmm.
means that both these series are going to be really good.
Yeah.
Is my hope. Conference finals are super fun. And I would love nothing more than to have both these series go like 6 or 7 games and have a bunch of close games and good
Yeah.
ones. And like we get series every once in a while that go like 6 or 7 and like every game's a blowout. And it's like, yeah, it's like it went far, but it kind of sucked. Like, and for the most part, I don't really see that happening. I think this could be a ton of fun.
Hmm.
I know this series also evokes a lot of nostalgia for people
Yeah.
with the Reggie Miller versus the Knicks, and like so
Yep.
you got the whole now Tyrese Halliburton is taking the Pacers into New York as the best player on the Pacers, and he just beat them in New York last year. Where like I think one thing people forget is that the Pacers absolutely smoked the Knicks like a salmon in Game 7 last year in New York. Like, you remember that? They shot like something insane, like 70% in the
Yeah.
first half.
But I believe Brunson was out at that point.
Yeah, he was either out or he was playing hurt. But
Yeah.
I will credit the Knicks though, as I really feel like that game and that series in particular was the emphasis for them to go out and be like, okay,
Yep.
like, yeah, Brunson was hurt. We didn't have all of our
Mhm.
guys. I think a lot of teams would look at that and be like, yeah, our best player was hurt. Let's just
Yeah.
run it back. And the Knicks went out and they're like, we need to get better. And so they add
Yeah.
Bridges and they add Cat and they make the moves that they feel like they need to make to get better. And I feel like they're a much better team this season because of it. And I feel like maybe that extra offensive firepower they have this year that they didn't really have last year
Hmm.
could be what gets them over the hump if like Bridges and Cat can play good enough. But
Yeah.
I think this is going to be an extremely difficult series for Cat defensively.
Oh yeah. Uh,
He does not like to move laterally and
doesn't like to move, period.
a lot.
If you're Tibbs, how are you deploying Bridges on defense in this series?
One thing we might see, like speaking of Steve Nash, is like one thing that teams used to do to him. Like I know there was the one theory that's they're like, yeah, we're just going to let Steve Nash have his points, and if they're not going to beat us if he's scoring and not passing. I don't really see that with Halliburton, but the one issue I think he's going to have is like, oh yeah, one possession he's getting guarded by Bridges, and the next it's Hart, and the next it's Anunoby. It's like, I talked a lot about the Wolves have a lot of
Yeah,
looks to throw at the Thunder.
that's
Like,
true.
holy shit, the Knicks have a lot to throw at a guard like Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah, that was kind of like I was thinking about that, and I was also thinking that Bridges is kind of at his best too when he's just able to cook and freelance a little bit and like make plays on the ball, off the ball. Um, and I almost wonder if it would be too constricting for them to defensively for him to follow Halliburton for most of the game.
Yeah, I think if I have my druthers and I'm Tibbs, I'm putting Anunoby as the primary defender on Halliburton.
Yeah.
And I'm saying like Bridges, you do your
Yep.
kind of free safety-ish thing.
And I think to that point too, I think the thing that could probably bother Halliburton the most is quite frankly just getting beaten up by someone bigger like Anunoby.
Yeah, I
He's much beefier than Hallie.
I just think of all the times that the Spurs would like throw Kawhi at smaller guards, and it would just be like, oh fuck, like, like
Well,
this is
they're gone.
not going to be fun or easy for me for however many games and however many minutes we play. Um, the only other thing I want to say about the Pacers, so I think about the Giannis situation like way more than any non-Bucks fan, probably just because like if I had known Luca was for sale, I would have talked about the Luca thing every week for months too, right? And I just think whatever Giannis is gonna do, like if he asks for a trade, like if he doesn't ask for a trade, the Bucks aren't trading him, right? So he has to go to the Bucks management and be like, "Hey, I want to be traded. Here's my list of preferred teams." The Pacers being this good, and like I kind of made the case already of like, hey, maybe the Cavs and Bucks actually aren't that bad, and the Pacers are just really good. If the Pacers go to the finals, could you just kind of talk yourself into like, hey, yeah, we got smoked in the first round, but that team's like really good and they're in the finals. Maybe we do just run this back in a shitty East where the Celtics are not going to be a factor next season. Or are you like more realistic about that if you're Giannis and you're just like, yeah, no, this team sucks. I'm out of here.
You're not gonna have Dame. That roster is garbage. It's bad. And I get that Giannis is Giannis, and he can probably still drag them to the playoffs. But like, I don't see a world where they get to the finals with things set up the way they are.
That's fair. I just think about this in inordinate amount of time. And I think about like, okay, so who's going to be on Giannis's list? And like, I think the Spurs now could be a somewhat realistic trade destination with
Hmm.
the number 2 pick. Does he open it up where he's like, yeah, I'm open to like the Thunder, Spurs, and Rockets, and the Bucks actually get a good package back? Or is he like, I want to go to the Warriors. You have to do this for me. And it's like, okay, guess we're getting Draymond Green and Kuminga and some picks. Woo. But I can I also just say this? I've seen this sentiment on Reddit and other places where fans of teams who are talking about trading for Giannis Antetokounmpo are like, I'm not giving up Stephon Castle. I'm not giving up, Tari Eason or Jalen Green or whatever. Like we don't need to put them in the trade. It's Giannis fucking Antetokounmpo. He is at worst the second best player in the entire world. Put whatever you need to put in the fucking package to get him on your team next season. Jesus Christ. If I see another post about like, oh, well, I would love to have Giannis, but not if Jaden Ivey's in the trade, fuck all the way off. This guy is absolutely incredible and makes you a championship contender immediately. I don't want to hear that Reed Shepard can't be in the Giannis Antetokounmpo trade.
So where I would add nuance to this is
No,
that
no, there's no
nope,
nuance.
no. So if the trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo creates the same situation that Giannis Antetokounmpo is currently in right now, then it defeats the purpose of trading for Giannis Antetokounmpo because he's not going to win there, and he's not going to win with you if you trade literally everything and all of your future picks to get him on a barren roster.
I'm not saying like you need to put every single
Yeah,
asset you have in a Giannis trade. All
no,
I'm
but
saying is that nobody is untouchable in a
yeah.
Giannis trade. It's not like they asked for Duran, Ivy, and Tobias Harris, and Ivy really can't be in there. Let's put someone else in there. Like, no, you're you're not like
Yeah.
this is not
No, and at
De'Aaron
that, like
Fox. It's not even
that's
Anthony
legitimate,
Davis.
right? You're giving two young rising players, and honestly, Tobias is salary filler.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a reasonable starting point, right?
Yeah, and then you're
Like
talking
I'm not,
picks. It's picks and
yeah,
swaps after that.
right. But when people are like, all right, let's also add Asar and Ron Holland, and I'm like, mm, uh, I think. adding three guys that have already shown that they are on the rise and have real NBA value is starting to get to the point where you are scooping out everything from your team to get this guy.
No,
And I think that is a mistake.
yeah, it's a different conversation when you're talking about like we're going to take every single asset we have and throw it in the honest trade.
Yep.
I'm talking specifically about people saying that player X is
No,
off
like
limits.
one player being off limits, like
Yeah.
that's
Like
silly.
Rockets fans are like, hey, we're not doing the trade if Asar Thompson or if Amin Thompson has to be in there. Fuck you. You're not doing the trade if Amin Thompson's in there. Spurs fans are like, well, we really don't want to put Castle in there. So if Castle's in there, we're just not doing the honest trade. Get the hell out of here. It makes me so mad that these teams value these young guys so much where they're like, oh, well, you never know what he could be. I know what he's not going to be, and that's Giannis Antetokounmpo. And I know Giannis is 30, but give me 4 seasons of Giannis over the careers of anyone that I've mentioned
Yeah.
so far.
Uh, you know who created this landscape and perspective on a superstar trade? Joe
Trying to,
Cronin. What when he decided to make that god awful Dame trade, like he reset the public's perspective on what those look like.
well, no, you know who really set up the
Well, Nico.
Nico Harrison, where people were like, you know what? Maybe we don't actually have to trade that much to get Giannis. Look what the Mavs
Nico's
got for
like, hey,
Luka.
at least I got AD.
The only player on any of the teams we mentioned, so we mentioned like the Rockets, the Spurs, the Pistons, Cade Cunningham would be off limits to me.
Yeah.
That's where I draw the line, right? But like,
yeah,
Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Reed Shepard, Jalen Green, Stephen Castle, get out of here telling me that someone is off limits in a Giannis trade. This is not Nico Harrison. But with that said, that is it for us. I'm sure my sister and her husband will really appreciate that rant I just went on because like, oh God, that's been pissing me. I can't imagine being a Bucks fan and someone trying to tell me that Castle is off limits from the Spurs.
No, like you have one player on your roster that is off limits.
Elite, not ball knower. I'll throw that out there. So, but that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Gmail, fouledoutsports@gmail.com, and you can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. Is a long name, but you can't miss it. This podcast will drop Tuesday, the 20th of May. Happy birthday to my dad. Happy birthday to Kevin, my buddy. Happy birthday to Dave. They got like 3 birthdays in a row.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Kevin's wife's birthday was like a couple days ago too. So happy birthday to her as well. Like there's birthdays all over the place, man. But yeah, this drops 5/20 is Tuesday. That is going to be the start of the conference finals between the Thunder and the Wolves, which is crazy that they have that fast turnaround after they just played game 7 yesterday, but is what it is, I guess. And then Wednesday, the Knicks and Pacers series starts. So everybody enjoy it. Matt and I will be back next week to break down the first couple games of the Western Conference Finals, the action, what's going to happen next. But until then, my friend, I will see you soon.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Bye, Mark.
Bye, Robin.